Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Before we go to Jeff Duncan today, we're going to get the latest on the Saints and Pelicans and whatever else. I just wanted to reflect for just a bit, thinking of people that have made their mark in coastal Mississippi, someone who's been on the show that, I care deeply about, someone who's a really dear friend. Al Hopkins passed away earlier this week, and his funeral was on Wednesday. Al was an incredible man, an absolutely incredible man. A lot of people know him through the Gaming Commission, but if you think about the people that were there to pay respects, he touched people in so many ways over so many years. Later in his life, he actually drove to night school at the seminary in New Orleans. And I was always incredibly impressed with his quest for life and his wanting to make his mark, and how deeply religious he was and how well read he was. Like, for example, one of the meetings, the time he was on the Coast Vue, in the background you see literally thousands of books. A noted lawyer. His work, again, with work on the Gaming Commission, is notable, but his contributions to this community, his legacy, is truly remarkable. And I hunted with Al. He had a tremendous impact on both of my sons, Justin and Jordan, especially my son Jordan, who is a lawyer now in coastal Mississippi. And my thoughts and prayers are with Ruth and the family. And, again, what an amazing legacy. And I know that's what they heard as a celebration of life. My friend Teresa Schultz posted this, and she put, who needs to see this? It's interesting when someone passes away, it makes you think of the people who are close to you that have passed away. But I saw, this is something that Donna Ashworth wrote in something called Loss. And I just think it's when you're reflecting about people who near you have passed away, I think this is such a hopeful way to look at it. And so, I would say, as Teresa said, who needs to see this? I will say, who needs to hear this? And here's what it says. If someone you love did not make it on that trip, you can make it for them, with them. If someone you love didn't witness that milestone, you can show them anytime you like. If someone you love did not get to do their living, you can finish those dreams on their behalf. The beautiful thing about love, you see, is that death need not stop life. If you carry someone in your heart, you can take them with you anywhere you like. I just think that's such a hopeful way to think about it. And I think about my father often, and I sense, I've said it on the show before, I sense he's with me and that he's proud. And so I take him with me. That is for sure. So I hope that helps some of you to hear that. Okay. Didn't mean to get too somber, but, with the passing of such a stalwart leader in coastal Mississippi and Al Hopkins, it causes some reflection. You can't help it. Now let's move to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Sorry, Jeff, to start the show out on a somber note, but man, when such a notable community leader and friend dies in the community, you can't help but reflect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure Al touched a lot of people's lives over there. So it's a nice tribute, Ricky, and certainly can appreciate and sympathize with what everybody's going through that was friends with Al.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. So listen, we talked a little bit last week about whether Sean Payton's legacy might get scarred because of what he was trying to do to steal coaches. Now the Saints have added, I think, 5. They announced in the last day or so. New coaches, and so you can give us an update on that. But before you do that, what's the latest on his efforts to steal coaches?
I think that might be tapped out unless Ronald Curry, he's the last one I think that's still up in the air, and I'm not even sure if he will be offered the offensive coordinator's job with the Broncos, but he has to make that decision because we all know, Ricky, Sean Payton's going to be the offensive coordinator wherever he's at, just like Dennis Allen is the defensive coordinator in New Orleans. And that's part of one of the reasons why, the co-op defense coordinators left, at least Ryan Nielsen left, because they want to coordinate their own scheme. And that's something that Ronald Curry is going to have to think about if he goes to Denver, is he's not going to be the one actually doing the hands-on coordinating. That'll be Sean Payton. But it is in title, and I'm sure in salary, a big promotion. So it certainly would be good for his resume more than anything else to work under Sean Payton. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but right now Declan Doyle is left. He's a rising star on the staff. He's going to be the tight ends coach, and of course Zach Strief, former player, is going to be the offensive line coach under Sean Payton. I know the staff here in New Orleans has worked, in the front office, worked very hard to try and keep this staff together, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They went into the offseason, Ricky, wanting to overhaul some of the defensive coaches and work on that side of the staff, but they wanted to keep the offensive staff intact, and so they've had to make a few more changes there than they expected.
Well, you had said that coming back to get Zach Strief was not necessarily a fait accompli, that he had building a house and had a young family and all of that. But so you're not surprised at the same time that he left, are you?
No, I mean, it's a big promotion for Zach. I mean, Sean Payton's the one that plucked him out of the broadcast booth, and is the one that drafted him. So they're very close, and I know they have great respect for each other. Sean Payton identified Zach early on as a rising star. I think Zach Strief is going to be either a coordinator one day in this league or maybe even a head coach. I mean, he is that good. He's a great communicator. He understands all facets of an operation. So it was a great move for him. I mean, Saints did not want to lose. Match salary he was going to get, so it was difficult to keep him on board.
So, Jeff, one of the things that you had speculated about is that with Carmichael staying as offensive coordinator, that some of the moves that they may make may be around bringing in a play caller. What's your latest thinking on that?
Well, I think Ronald Curry would get some of that consideration if he stays. I don't think they've decided any of that yet, Ricky. I mean, I think they're going to wait, see how they get the staff, the consistency of the staff. One guy that's out there that no one's really mentioned yet is Joe Lombardi, who's a longtime quarterbacks coach here, very close friends with Pete Carmichael. He's been kind of in the mix with both Sean Payton's staff in Denver and here in New Orleans. I think he'd probably rather be here just because he spent 12, 14 years of his career here in New Orleans. His kids all had friends here. He's available now after losing the job as offensive coordinator in Los Angeles. I think all that's up in the air. If, for instance, if Ronald Curry were to leave and go with Sean Payton, I think Joe Lombardi would step into that role. So there's a lot to still be determined right now. And I don't think they want to make any of those. They don't have to make a decision on who the play caller is right now. They'll probably wait till training camp before they decide that.
Yeah, I wonder what your thoughts about Joe Lombardi were, because I know you were always very high on him, and when he left the Saints, it was a good opportunity for him, and you weren't surprised to see it. Did he fail, or was he just a victim of circumstance?
I think it was probably a little of both, but more than anything else, the head coach came under fire, and when that happens, a lot of times we saw it happen in Dallas this year. They have to make changes to their staff, and he was the unfortunate head on the chopping block, along with some other guys there in Los Angeles. When you've got a quarterback like Justin Herbert, a lot of expectations come with that, and they did not feel like that offense performed. I would disagree, Ricky. I thought Joe Lombardi did a fine job, but there's going to be some pressure on Brendan Staley this year now after making those moves if they can't get it done in Los Angeles. He brought in Kellen Moore from Dallas to be the offensive coordinator. We'll see how Kellen Moore adjusts out there with Justin Herbert.
It's going to be interesting. And Justin Herbert, of course, is just an incredible talent. And I always wondered if Justin Herbert had been married up to Sean Payton, what would the outcome have been? That would have been pretty interesting to watch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's as good a talent as I've ever seen. I mean, including Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is more unconventional, just an incredible leader. But Justin Herbert, just physically gifted. I think the thing that people don't understand about Herbert, he's 6'6", Ricky. I mean, he's a big, tall guy, but he's so athletic, and so he's built almost like a prototype of a quarterback, how you want your quarterback built. He's just the perfect specimen for when they draw up an NFL quarterback prototype. And he makes throws. I've seen him make throws in the Superdome. I've not seen any other quarterback make it. That includes Mahomes. So, yeah, there's a lot of expectation there. That's the kind of guy you win a Super Bowl with.
What's interesting about Mahomes, it's fun to kind of watch him, and he's come a long way. It's good, obviously Jalen Hurts, had a great Super Bowl, and what an incredible young leader he is. But coming back to Mahomes, it's interesting to know that Mahomes was a gifted shortstop. And when you know that and you watch the way how some of those plays materialize and those sidearm passes and all the things that he does, and he's so accurate doing it, it makes sense. I mean, a great shortstop can be a great quarterback, can't they?
Yeah, look, that's a great point. I mean, I think it's important for people out there, if they've got kids in sports, realize not getting too focused, especially at young ages, of playing one sport. I mean, Drew Brees talked about that. Drew was a great baseball player, played third base, went to Purdue to play baseball in addition to football. And, of course, Patrick Mahomes, his dad was Pat Mahomes, who was a major league pitcher for 11 years. So he first was brought up in the sport of baseball. And a lot of these, traits translate over to other sports. Drew Brees can talk to you all day long about how golf swing is almost the same base that you get from throwing a football.
When we come back with Jeff Duncan on the other side, we'll talk more about Carr and what the latest there is. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Jeff's not only a Saints expert, but pays attention to the Pelicans. He really enjoys paying attention to the PGA. He's a horse racing guy. He's sort of an LSU guy. You hit on a lot of cylinders, but today we're talking Saints. If we have time toward the end, I'll get your view on Tiger Woods coming back. It's pretty cool that he continues to, exceed some expectations in that regard. Okay, so Carr, he got released just like you expected him to. He's going to be at least 3 or 4 teams are going to be very interested in him as a free agent. Are the Saints still in play in your view?
Yeah, look, I think he's going to end up in New Orleans. I'll be surprised if he does. And I think he wants to be here. I think the biggest obstacle the Saints have is their salary cap situation. He was averaging about $30 million a year on his contract. I mean, he's not going to get that close to that here, maybe half of that, or maybe a little more than half. And that's going to be difficult for the Saints. So really, some of their salary cap issues coming home to roost for them. But in the end, I think they find a way to get creative and to get him on board. I mean, Dennis Allen drafted him in Oakland when he was out there, so they have familiarity. They stayed in touch all these years. And you don't come to town for 2 days with your wife if you're not serious about making this your future home. So I'll be surprised if he's not, in the end, the same. But it's not going to happen soon. He's going to take his time. His agent is being very thorough, so I think he's going to try and visit every place that has an opening right now that has interest in him.
Have you had any access to him yourself?
Oh, no. I mean, you don't really get a chance to there with him. I just know that I know from his past, reading about him, when he came here this year, we had a chance to visit with him then when they played here. Of course, the Saints shut them out. He had a terrible game in the Dome, but he talked at length about his relationship back in the day with Dennis Allen and staying in touch. So it just makes sense. But the other teams that are going to be interested in him, part of the interesting part of this recruitment is Carolina is interested, and I think Tampa Bay is probably going to throw their hat in the ring. So you have basically the NFC South, Ricky, competing, and they know not only if they don't get him, but your rival ends up getting him, and he's clearly probably the top free agent quarterback on the market this offseason, assuming Aaron Rodgers doesn't get to free agency.
One of the things I think about when I think about, the Saints salary cap is that they've been masterful given the challenges they've had with it over the years of dealing with it. But it's one of the issues here, Jeff, that they keep renegotiating contracts and sort of kicking the ball down further. And the more times they kick the ball down further, the more the snowball gets bigger in terms of the future salary cap considerations. Is that it? And when's the reckoning moment and all that?
Yeah, I mean, part of it gets, a little bit diffused by the fact that the cap rises every year. So there's a little bit of that philosophy there, and the fact that they know they're going to have more room to operate in future years because the salary cap keeps going up because league revenues keep skyrocketing. I mean, we saw just this past weekend, the Super Bowl is the most watched ever. I mean, it just continues. The interest in the NFL continues. And so there's a philosophy there with the Saints that, we'll have more room down the road. It's almost like your credit card. If you know your spending limit is going to keep going up, you can keep spending. But at some point, you do pay the price. And this is a good example. I mean, they're having to compete on a guy that probably wants to be here, and they want him here, but yet they might not be able to get him on board because of these past problems with the cap.
So it's such a challenging situation, but getting him in the fold, if we were to get him in the fold, he's got some years left, and he's extraordinarily talented, isn't he?
Yeah, he can make every throw in the book. He's very, very athletic, much more athletic than people think. He would be a perfect fit in a lot of ways for what the Saints want to do. He can threaten people downfield so defenses can't gang the line of scrimmage like they did against Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. I mean, everybody knew the Saints were going to try and run the ball, so made it difficult when they didn't worry about the deep threat. They didn't worry about Andy Dalton beating them deep. That won't be the case with Derek Carr, and especially with the emergence of Rashid Shaheed at receiver and Chris Olave. You've got two young, dynamic wideouts on the outside.
What you're hearing about Michael Thomas these days is it likely, or maybe not so likely, that he wouldn't be with the Saints next year?
I think it's unlikely, but I don't think you completely rule it out. I think he's waiting in the wings, seeing what they do at quarterback. I think a lot of things are on hold to see how this plays out with Derek Carr. Certainly, you'd have more incentive to come back here if you're Mike Thomas, if you've got a quarterback like Carr, because you can see that potentially you could have a big season and maybe cash in a year later. If Mike Thomas does play this season, it's going to be at a very reduced rate. And I don't know if he's willing to do that. It really comes down to what he wants to do. The way this has been set up, he's going to have to make a decision to come back here and play at a much, much more reduced rate. And the other option would be to go out in the open market and see if you can get a better deal. And that's going to be difficult, Ricky. I mean, he hasn't played very much in 3 years. So what kind of deal can he get? Otherwise, the Saints probably end up releasing him.
So, a lot of speculation about Jameis that he will not ever play another down for the Saints again, but he's still in the fold. Would you have expected him to be released already, or what's the latest thinking on Jameis?
No, because, they're not going to release him until you have the other quarterback on hand, right? I mean, you still got him under contract. Very similar to what happened with Drew Brees. When they signed Drew Brees, the next day they released Aaron Brooks. You're not going to release Aaron Brooks until you know you've got somebody there. If you've got him under contract, there'd be no reason to create a problem for yourself. So I would imagine if they get another quarterback, and there's been a lot of other rumors out there. I mean, I saw speculation about Baker Mayfield. I think right now it's Derek Carr, or they have to go to plan B. And I don't even know what plan B would be. I think it's clearly Derek Carr or bust right now.
Very, very interesting. Hey, listen, anything else on the Saints before we shift gears?
No, I mean, look, we mentioned the 5 coaches that have been brought in, bolstering the staff. Joe Woods, Marcus Robertson on the defensive side of the ball, guys that worked with Dennis Allen before with the Raiders. So that's going to be interesting. They're going to be running Dennis Allen's scheme, and they're familiar with it, so that should help. But they still got some work to do, replacing some of the offensive assistants. And look, things are going to heat up here in about 2 weeks. We've already seen them make a move to restructure Marcus May's contract. More of that's going to happen as they get prepared for the start of free agency here in early March.
Well, they thought they could do it with Deshaun Watson, given those kind of numbers. So, maybe they can do it with Carr for sure. Yeah. Okay. So last, I wanted to mention Tiger Woods because you're sort of a PGA watcher. It's really interesting to see him come back and play in this tournament. There's every indication, unless his ankle doesn't hold up, that he plans to play more.
Yeah, I was very excited to see that. I mean, I wish the weather were a little better for him. It was very cold. I think it was like 41 degrees when he teed off the other day. But, I mean, how can you not root for the guy, what he's done, what he's come through? I would not count that guy out. I mean, I know he hasn't been the same player. Who could be? But it's just great for golf. It's great for sports to see someone of that magnitude, one of the all-time greats, continue to play and show that resilience and perseverance.
And then coming over to the Pelicans, your biggest concern from the start, even while Zion was out for basically a season or more, actually. Zion's got an injury bug. I hope he can get over that.
Yeah, setback in his hamstring. And he was going to play this week. I mean, all indications were he was coming back to play the last 2 regular season games before the All-Star break. He had a setback with a hamstring. Now he might miss a few more weeks it's going to be difficult, Ricky. I mean, this team went from looking at a top seed in the West to maybe having to struggle just to get into the playoffs now. They'll be fortunate to make the play-in game without Zion. The most remarkable stat, and it's a disturbing one, since Willie Green took over as coach 2 years ago, only 12 games has he had Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson on the court together. That's remarkable.
You can't win if your stars on the court. But boy, man, early in the season, man, when you saw them hitting on every cylinder, this was a dynamic team. But they're top heavy, and that's kind of a sign of the NBA, isn't it? I mean, your stars have to be on the court, or you're not going to win. And that's certainly the story of the Pelicans, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a star-driven league. I mean, it's a lot like Premier League soccer. You pay the stars different salaries, and you expect them on the court. The Pelicans just have not been able to do that with Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram. They just made a deal. They brought in Josh Richardson, a kind of a rotational player, swing man. I think he's going to help them, give them some veteran leadership. But they got to get Zion Williamson back. And until then, we're at the break now, but they got to tread water in the West until they get him back on the court. And they can't rush him back with those hamstring injuries. They're very finicky. They can set back anytime, as we learned.
Hey, good thing about the hamstring injury is that it's not a foot injury. So,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
The problem is, I mean, the big guy like Zion, I mean, you can't do much cardio when you have a hamstring injury. So it's kind of a complicated situation to get him back into game shape as well.
Ooh, yeah, because he's a big man and he's got a big frame and he wants to be, really big. And it's work for him to not be really big. Jeff, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend. Look forward to visiting with you next week.
All right, Ricky. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you next week, Ricky.
You bet. We'll see you after this break.